So that's what I did. I yelled it as loud as I could. I go, fresh one. And then I hear guys in the distance, yeah, get him, Matt, get him, way off. And I'm like, all right, that got their attention.
Today on the Western Outdoor News Podcast, we get a first-hand explosive report out of Lake Hemet. You might have read it on the first page of Western Outdoor News, but hear it from the man himself, Andrew Mack. He fills us in on the crazy trout bite that's going on in Lake Hemet right now. And then we have a very important conversation with AFTCO CEO and CCA California Chairman Bill Shedd. He talks to us about the evolution of AFTCO and where the company is going, but he also issues this warning to anglers.
If we don't bring rational thought to this 30-30 and the ultimate 50-50 plan, take your fishing rods, throw them in a trash can, take your boat, and turn it into a ski boat or a party boat, because you're not going to have fishing opportunity in California.
He is obviously referring to AB 3030 and its attempt to restrict access to fishable water in California. Hear about what he's doing and what the CCA of California is doing to prevent these restrictions. But first, let's get to that page one story from Western Outdoor News. Big trout firing on all cylinders at Lake Hemet. Let's go to our field reporter, Andrew Mack, to hear all about it.
All right. Well, I went out there on Thursday to Lake Hemet. I knew that it was going to be snow on the ground and, all that stuff. So I decided to bring, get my layers on, get my waders on, all that good stuff. Headed out to Hemet. I've only fished there one other day, so I kind of knew nothing about it. And that day was the day before. The
second day on the lake.
The second day on the lake, yeah. And from what I kind of gathered from the first day was that the fish were deep. They did stock on Tuesday. It was 4,000 pounds from Mount Lassen. Like I said, on Wednesday, we knew that they were deep because I caught one, cast it as far as I could out. And then I actually lost a big one, but again, everyone that was catching, I think there's only 7 or 8 fish caught that day. Everything was as far as you can cast. So I had to get a game plan together for the next day because I knew, I got to fish this lake. I mean, it's one of the few lakes that are in Southern California that actually feel like you're in the Sierras, if that makes any sense. I mean, there was the day I was there, there was bald eagles. Like I heard a bald eagle chirping, flying over, coyotes. I mean, there was trees everywhere, snow on the ground. It was just a beautiful day. So when I first showed up to the lake, I got out of my truck, put my waders on. I think it was like 31 degrees or something like that. It's freezing. I talked to the guy next. I said, "Hey, anyone get any bites?" I was over there where they ended up stocking the fish. And the guy said, "No, we've been here for 3 hours. Nothing. Nobody's caught nothing." I go, "Oh, okay. I'm going to go find them then." So on that lake, which is cool because you can actually drive around the whole lake next to the shoreline pretty much. So what I did was I went to the other side of the lake and I stopped. I got out. I had what I do is I drop shot. So kind of like for bass fishing, but with drop shotting on 2-pound test, little yellow and white minnow with like a foot leader. So I stopped at the first spot, casted 15 times. Okay, no action at all. From there, went to the next little point, casted again 15 times, nothing. About the 7th spot, when I finally stopped, I cast it out. The first cast, I got short bit. I was sitting there bouncing the jig, with the rod, and all of a sudden I hear bam. I'm like, oh, okay, that wasn't a rock, that was something. So right then and there, I'm thinking, okay, maybe I found him.
Yeah.
Rolled it back in. Had to put the minnow back on the hook because when the trout hit it in the back, it kind of pulled it out, the back end of the hook. Reset it, cast it out again, bounce. Bam! I was like, oh, what do I got? And so now I'm sitting there fighting this fish, I'm like looking around and there's nobody next to me. I mean, I had the whole shoreline to myself. Yeah, every angler was over there where they stock the fish. And, I'm like this, and I was talking to a buddy of mine on the phone. I said, hey, I go, I'm on a good one. I go, should I make it known and get people over here? He goes, me, I wouldn't. I go, but that's not how I do it. I'm going to get everyone. So everyone fishes saltwater. And you know what we do when we get a yellowtail or something? We go, fresh one. So that's what I did. I yelled it as loud as I could. I go, fresh one. And then I hear guys in the distance, yeah, get him, Matt, get him, way off. And I'm like, all right, that got their attention. The thing was rip and drag. I had a friend who actually lives there, Russell Kitchen. He was way over. He drove his truck around. He goes, "Hey, do you need it? It looks like a good one." I said, "Yeah, you want to help me with the net?" So anyway, we got it in the net, got it out. I put it on my, I got an IGFA certified scale, a little handheld one, came out to 6.5 pounds. Got the fish on the stringer, cast it out again, brought it in, nothing, cast it out again, hooked up again. This time it was a 7.5 pounder. I was 7.4. Wow. So I got 2 fish, a 6.5 and a 7.4, my first 2 fish of the day. And I'm like, at this point, I'm making all kinds of noise, yell fresh one again. And then all of a sudden I turn around, now 4 cars came and parked behind me. And I go, hey, dude, I got enough shoreline for everybody. Everyone just get in here. The fish are here. You know, I figured the more lines in the water, the more active it's going to keep the fish around. So from there, after that, I think I got what was it? It was another 6.5 pounder. So now I have a 6.5, a 7.5, and a 6.5. And then I missed a couple short bites. And then guys next to me started hooking up, with their jigs. One guy, I think, had a 5. One guy had a 4. One guy had another guy caught a 7.3. That was, I guess, his personal best ever. So he's all ecstatic. I mean, he was shaking because it's so cold out there, but he's like, I got a big fish,
Couldn't tell if it was the nerves or if it was the weather.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So after he caught that fish, he turned the truck on and sat in the heater for a while.
When you are doing this drop shot, are you said you're shaking the tip a lot, or are you kind of dragging it along the bottom of the water there?
Basically, I want that weight just to be snug on the bottom, not so much to where it's going to be off the bottom. I want the weight just to keep the line straight. And then the action is coming from the tip of the rod, where I basically want the little minnow. It's a 1.5-inch minnow, and I want it to kind of look like a worm shape, like making that S waver through the water. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if it's doing that perfectly, real slow, those fish will come up behind it. Either they'll chase it close and slam it, or they'll slam it way out. And yesterday I had a lot that I could actually watch. I could see this dark shadow behind there coming, 5 feet from me, bam, and then just take off. I was like, oh, he's on, going crazy. So now I have 3 fish on the stringer. I mean, it's an epic day already. I mean, I had, like I said, a 6.5, a 6.5, and like a 7.4. Cast out again, and I get smoked. I mean, this thing hits so hard. I'm sitting there like, what is this? And I went live because on my waders, I have a little pocket right in the front. So I would hurry up and go Facebook Live, tuck it in my little pocket so everyone can watch. You know, and I mean, this thing, there was probably one, it was like 15 solid seconds of just straight running. It's, and I'm like, oh, look at it go, going crazy. And like, cause I know everyone's watching, I see the comments, I'm looking down, comment, like, oh my God, this guy, we're at work and he's catching fish, but it was, anyway, it was about, I would say about a 7-8 minute fight or so. I fished 2-pound isers. So there's not many mistakes you can make with this line, but you got to be very sensitive and have that drag set. Anyway, he was way far out, and then I seen his tail. His tail came out, perfect tail. And I mean, this fish looked like a giant. And the first thing I was like, did I get a double digit? Did I break that 10-pound mark? So anyway, fighting him again. He kept coming close, take off, kept coming close, take off. And then one other guy, he goes, hey, you want me to help you with the net? I said, no, let me get this one on my own. So I had the net in my hand, reeling it, finally got him close enough. I actually walked out in the water probably about 3.5 feet. I figured because it's real shallow there. A big fish like that, they sense the shallow water. They're going to go crazy, probably break the line. Walked out 3.5 feet, got him close, went to scoop, deep scoop, brought him up. Fish is in there. 9 pounds, 4 ounces.
No way.
Oh, yep. So that, again, there's no lying because I have to use a certified scale. So it's not like, oh, I got a 12-pound. No, this thing was a solid certified 9.4. So now I got 4 fish on my stringer, which is what, a 7, 2 6s, and now a 9. And the only thing I'm thinking was, that is a lot of meat I'm going home with. I will not kill a fish the rest of the day. What's good about drop shotting is on the drop shot, you get them in the beak about 98% of the time. In the beak, right there in the side of the mouth. It's real easy. You don't even have to bring the fish out of the water. I just, with my number 8 owner mosquito, I just push the back of it, pops right out, put him right in the water, make sure he's good to go, and he swims off. After I had those 4 fish, the next fish, I'm thinking, oh, they're just getting bigger. It's a 9.4. Heck yeah. Next fish, 8 inches. I go, what? So an 8-inch fish, let it go. The next one after that was a 4-pounder. The one after that was another 6'8", I think it was. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at this fish like, that would be my 5-fish stringer. I'm done. Or do I want to make sure these fish are good for other people? And by this time, there's 15 to, I would say maybe 20 cars or so along the line. everyone's, getting in there, getting their spots. I keep telling people to drive by, come over here. There's fish right here. Try to get everyone squeezed in, catching fish. The end of the cove, there was a family, and it looked like a little 4-year-old. I think he was 4. They set up their rods. I said, you got to cast out far. So the dad, he had waders. He walked out, casted out far. 10 minutes into it, I see them get up, run over to the rod. He sets the hook, and the little boy is just looking at him. And he's like, here, son, hands him the rod. This kid at this point going, it's a big one, Daddy, it's a big one. He's just rolling this fish, right? The dad gets in the water, makes a scoop, and from where I'm standing, it looked big. And my buddy Russell, again, walked over there and said, hey, what? He goes, this is 6.7 pounds. The kid's never caught a fish that big. I think his biggest one is probably a pound. So he's cheering, going crazy. I just caught a big fish. He wants to show everybody. He's yelling, to everybody. It was Lake Hemet. I mean, it was a great experience yesterday. I ended up catching about 20 fish. Again, I only kept 4, all released safely. So like my top biggest fish, it was 9.4, 7.5, 2 6.5. The went back, the 6.8 went back, a 6.6 went back, a 5.2 went back. I think 3 or 4 4-pounders went back. A handful of 3-pounders went back. I think it was 6 or 7 2-pounders. And of course the little 8-inch ones went back.
Yeah. And they're all out deep on that drop shot, right?
Oh yeah. Always on the drop shot. And I get messages all the time, cause a lot of people are getting into jig fishing. A lot of people bait fish for trout. Mm-hmm. They're getting into the jig. They have a bunch of questions. What I do tell them, the most important thing is to get that hook going straight up and down. Meaning you want that J to go straight up and, the backwards right on the down. And then once you do the minnow, you want the minnow right in the center to where, basically when you're doing it, that minnow is coming across the water line straight up where that tail is doing that S shape.
Yeah, that bounce up and down.
Shape. And that's what's getting picked up the most.
You're describing almost a perfect day on the water. I mean, I can't even imagine a better day.
If it wasn't for the scenery, which, like I said, felt like the Sierras, it's like, and then the day with the trout fishing, just the weather being, all the shoreline was all snow. I mean, it was like, like I said, the bald eagle was over there at their nest making noise. The coyotes were in the background, because an ambulance drove by on the street. It was a really, really awesome experience on top of just a killer fishing day. So many big fish in there. It's like, and I was talking to, Russell again. He's like, this is a great lake, but not a lot of people come here. He goes, and it would be, if they got more revenue, they would stock like this all the time. So I think after all these pictures and all these photos and all my live videos, because I mean, if each one probably has a few thousand hits on each one, it's like people are going to get excited and they're going to go once this weather breaks. That's for sure.
Yeah, you're the Lake Hemet ambassador right now, trying to spread the word, which it sounds like you did there that day. I mean, a lot of people in your situation would not have invited everybody over and kind of shared your spot with everybody. And it's kind of refreshing to hear that take about, hey, everybody come catch these fish. And like you said, that 4-year-old who is catching the biggest fish of his life, that's a memory that he'll have forever. So
heck yeah, he's going to go on, on school I'm sure they do the Zoom still. So he's probably going to go on Zoom and tell his teacher, I caught a 6-pound, trout this weekend or whatever. But to me, that's the thing about fishing. I mean, it's not catching fish is awesome. I love catching fish. They always say the tug is the drug. What I enjoy most is enjoying it with people, getting new anglers out there. For never experiencing or being at that lake, I'm jealous for like people like Russell who get to live there and call that place their home.
Yeah.
It's just, it's an awesome lake and just the amount of fish they stock, the size of them. And that's another thing why after 4, I'm like, I want people to enjoy what I just did today. And I want to make sure these fish stay in the water as long as possible.
Speaking of conservation and keeping some fish in the water, I sat with AFTCO CEO and CCA California Chairman Bill Shedd, where he talks about his upbringing with AFTCO and what he's doing with the CCA to ensure that there's a future for all anglers.
Well, I had a dad who liked to fish like nobody I've ever met, so we're a fishing family. Fished as a kid with him, went off to college. Was always raised that I wouldn't go to work in a business that Dad was involved with. Dad was the co-founder of SeaWorld, so there was never any thought or option of my working down there. nor my brother. And the day that he and Mom bought AFTCO in 1973, he had a heart problem. Went into Hoag Hospital. They said, we got to send you to Texas. They sent him down there. He had a quadruple bypass.
Wow.
Shortly after that, I graduated and came to help what was going to be short term. And that was a long time ago.
So what did AFTCO look like back then compared to what it looks like today?
AFTCO was in a 2,400 square foot building. We used about that we rented. We used about half of that space. We made the world's best roller guides, just a couple of models, which we've expanded on significantly since. Today, AFTCO's moved from that 2,400 square foot rented facility to a 117 foot facility here in Santa Ana that we now own.
Okay. Yeah, obviously a major difference with the company. What about the industry as a whole, just the whole fishing industry, and what did the landscape look like in the 70s compared to what we're looking at today?
Very different. Back in the 70s, it was there was even at the manufacturing level, there was a number of family-owned businesses. Many of them in their second or third generations, some just starting. Today, in the manufacturing side of the business, there's very few family-owned businesses that remain. The big difference in the size, just not the number of smaller manufacturers that there once was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and back then there was really another big difference was there was no awareness or interest in conservation issues because the resource was still just naturally strong,
abundant.
It was abundant. Populations and pressures hadn't really caught up. We're just beginning to catch up. And back then, you'd go to a AFMA meeting. That name changed now to the ASA. And my dad would want to talk about fisheries resource issues, conservation issues, and guys would say, "Oh, come on, Mel, let's get past that. Let's get on to business issues." Well, today, big difference in the industry, in the community, is people understand that having a healthy resource and that conservation issues are business issues.
Absolutely. They go hand in hand. So speaking of going hand in hand, I know that AFTCO has a 10% pledge to protect and conserve, and obviously you have a lot of involvement with the CCA. Can you tell people about the CCA and what it is for some of our listeners? Sure.
And that 10% pledge, that's something that really came from my dad. It wasn't formalized, but we had always contributed well over 10% of our profits back to the industry and conservation issues. It was just kind of part of our DNA. My son Casey, who's now the president, just in the last few years formalized that into a specific stated plan. But for well over 40 years, we've been doing that same thing. CCA, the Coastal Conservation Association of California, it's the largest saltwater fishing conservation group in the country. It's got chapters in pretty much every coastal state. We started here in California about 4 or 5 years ago. And it really came out of when United Anglers of Southern California, it went away, and a number of people got together and here at AFTCO and trying to figure out, should we start another group? Mm-hmm. And I remember, and could we start another group? And could we be successful at it? I remember Bart Hall saying in that meeting, there was a meeting had about 8 or 10 of us in it, and he said, "Well, Bill, I don't know if we are going to be able to make it work, but we got to try." So we sort of looked through what were the options, and as we drew on a chalkboard what we were looking to accomplish, those of us that were familiar with CCA in other states thought, that looks like the CCA model. So that group decided to create a CCA here in California.
Okay. So when you have a conservation group, what does that actually look like? What does that mean? What is it, the boots on the ground, like what is actually being done by these conservation groups? Well,
it starts, like any organization, it starts with people. So the makeup of CCA is there's currently, I think there's 39 board members, It's a kind of a who's list of leaders in the Southern California sport fishing community. Ultimately, it will spread all through the state. But we had a staff of one for a while in Wayne Coto. So we've added Chris to it in the last the last little over a year. So it has a board of directors, has a staff, and I got to say just up front that Wayne, our executive director, does a tremendous job. Board members, everybody brings to the table, their different talent. We've got some of the top leaders in conservation issues. We've got some of the leaders in the industry, leaders in communications with several media, from radio to newspaper to online. We've got some leaders from clubs, leaders that have different abilities. Some folks that have an ability to help raise some money. A range of people, and we just say, look, when you get on the board, we just need you to take your expertise and apply it to benefiting the anglers of Southern California and the resource.
Yeah. So you've mentioned conservation, of course, on the whole West Coast. And it seems like there's just a battle to be an angler in this state sometimes. So what are some of the biggest wins that you've had against some of this, some of these bills that have been put in place to kind of attack your average California angler?
Well, a number of wins. I mean, all the way back to, that wasn't too long ago, that they were looking to take bluefin tuna and put very severe restrictions on our ability to take them, all the way to the point of including them on a protected species list, where if that was the case, we'd have zero take for bluefin tuna. So if any of your listeners have caught a bluefin tuna in the last 2 or 3 years, you can thank CCA for it. Mm-hmm. We work with others to create the drift gill net legislation to remove drift gill nets from California. We got that passed through both the Senate and the Assembly with just one vote against it. So that's going to wind down over years, and we're in the process of seeing the benefit from that.
And I know you're being humble here, but I saw the photos of you testifying and getting this prevented. But I mean, if you guys weren't there, this would have just kept happening with these drift gill nets. So that just really shows the importance of CCA and having somebody in that chair to put a stop to all this. And obviously, in some circumstances, you are that person. So thank you so much. I mean, on behalf of all of our listeners, like you said, if you've caught a tuna in the past 2 years, I mean, CCA and yourself, you have to thank.
Well, there's lots of people to thank, and the testifying, that was actually before Congress back in D.C. That was with legislation that national legislation that was primarily being driven by the ASA, the American Sport Fishing Association, on the national level. We were their partner in that effort. That did pass. Then President Trump decided not to sign it. So now we're back at the federal level to start over again and get legislation passed and then signed, just so that drift gill nets can't be used anywhere in the country. The only place they're being used is in California, but that would prevent it from coming back in the future. But with all these things, it's not just about a person. I appreciate the kind comments, but with all of these things, there's just a whole lot of people in different areas that are working on them. You asking what is CCA? What have they done for us lately? Well, the big thing was this AB 3030.
Yeah, I didn't want to say the dirty word, but there it is, AB 3030, also known as MLPA 2.0. Well, I mean, I'll let you take the reins on that and kind of explain what that is to everybody.
Well, it's a worldwide effort to make 30% of all land and water protected areas to enhance biodiversity. And look, we're all for enhancing biodiversity. If we don't have a healthy, we being the sport fishing community, if we don't have a healthy resource, if we don't have a healthy ocean and have healthy fish populations, then there's going to be no fishing. So the reality is that the true marine conservationists in the last 50 years have been sport fishermen. And so for the folks from the environmental community to come along, backed up, frankly, by a $1 billion donation. Now, this is to be used not just in California or in the States, but worldwide. There's this worldwide effort to create this extended protected areas. And our sense is, look, if there's a area that needs protecting and there's science behind it, we're all for it. But just to arbitrarily drop the hammer and say, we want to prevent a father from taking his son or daughter fishing with a single hook and line in a given area because we think that's going to protect biodiversity. Well, it's not going to. And why cause all that harm to social harm for really with no real valid reason. But there was when this came up in California, and they did it first in California because, frankly, we've got one of the more liberal states that would be more open to this kind of thing, at least within our politicians. And they thought that they could start in California and then launch it to the rest of the country. Nobody gave us a chance of keeping that from getting through both the Assembly and the Senate. I mean, nobody gave us a chance. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't just about CCA. We partnered, but we were the lead organization, the league entity. We partnered again with the ASA, with the IGFA, with the NMMA, with even the shooting sports industry, and lots of other folks. But it was the CCA lobbyist who was really, and CCA's executive director, Wayne Coda, along with Mark Gorelnik, who is a CCA board member and chairman of our Government Affairs Committee, who is also the chairman of the Pacific Marine Fisheries Management Council. So we have some real heavyweights within our organization. And so it was, really very much a team effort. And the result of all that was that it didn't get out of didn't get out of our legislature. One of the things that happened was CCA organized. They had because of COVID, had a meeting that took place online on the phone. We had some 400 people call in, expressing their concern with passage of something that really wasn't properly thought through and appropriate.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, we as fishermen, we agree with the sentiment that certain things do need to be protected. But like you said, if it's intentionally vague and there's no science behind it, then how are we supposed to support just more regulation for no reason, right?
Right. Yeah. Just because doesn't work.
In a perfect scenario, what kind of rules and regulations would you suggest to be put into place for the fishing industry to protect anglers?
Well, that's a long question to answer. There's a long answer to that question, but for starters, look at what actually works. Mm-hmm. And when you look at all around this country, whether it's redfish in the Gulf Coast and the Southeast, or white sea bass here that people will be familiar with, even striped bass in the Northeast, where proper management has been put in place, and where fish were being extracted in excessive amounts were reduced. Typically, in the past, that meant gear types, and so when you keep bottom trawls and gill nets and gear that harvests too much fish at once and has too much bycatch, you can recover fisheries and recover a resource, and that's happened all over the country. So the first step is to have proper management in place, and it means proper seasons on proper bag limits on ourselves, continuing catch and release by anglers. So there's lots of things, and in the right place at the right time. For example, there's a situation right now in Florida with grouper that there's a spawning area, and the sport fishing community is working to close the fishing in that spawning area during the spawn. So in that case, a protected area, a closed area makes sense. Mm-hmm. But just a blanket, close it all off just because, We want X
It doesn't
percent.
work.
It's not going to fly.
All right. So at the beginning of the interview, you mentioned obviously there's been a family connection to SeaWorld, and I see on the AFTCO website that you guys work with hubs at SeaWorld. What kind of work do you guys do with hubs?
Well, I'm chairman of the board of directors of the Hub SeaWorld Research Institute, so we're involved with many aspects of it. My personal real passion is with the white sea bass program. That was started by my dad. Back before there was even an ORHAP. That was started by my dad and Don Kent, who now is the president and then was a research scientist back in the mid 1970s. CCA is now very much involved with hubs and the white sea bass program and working to ultimately help them to expand a halibut component of it as well.
Yeah. So what is the current white sea bass program? What are you guys doing with white sea bass?
For the last 30 years, white sea bass have been raised started at the Hubs facility in San Diego, and then moved up to Carlsbad, where a hatchery was built. And we've put more than 2 million white sea bass back into the ocean to try to help bring back a resource that was knocked down. And it's not that it was extinct. There was always white sea bass, but the population was knocked way back, in large part due to the use of gill nets. So sport fishing community worked to remove the nearshore gill nets. That began to bring the sea bass back and to give Mother Nature an extra help. We came up with the idea of let's raise them in a hatchery and put them back in the ocean, and let's learn how to do that responsibly and see if we can't help Mother Nature.
I've always wondered, when you guys have these hatcheries and then you release them, where exactly, I mean, not that I'm trying to find the exact spot, but where do you do the release, and do you guys tag these fish? They're
all tagged. They got a little tag that's implanted in their cheek when they're about 8 inches long, 6 inches long. When you catch a white sea bass, and we need anglers to turn their heads into the Hub SeaWorld Research Institute, they can wave a wand over it. And this thing is the size of a sliver. But they can detect it and they can read it. That helps them to know if it's a hatchery fish or not. And, where do the fish go? Fish that have been released. This is an amazing thing about Mother Nature. The fish are released not too far from the home harbors where they're raised. They're raised in a half a dozen different grow-out facilities run by CCA-sponsored groups up and down the Southern California coast. But we've had fish go from Newport Beach to the Channel Islands, and we've had fish go from Catalina Island back to the mainland. We've had it's amazing. How does a fish that's raised in a hatchery and released at Huntington Harbor or Newport Harbor or Marina del Rey or San Diego, how does it know how to get to Catalina Island?
$1 million question right there.
How do you know that? It's just you're off by a degree or two, and you miss it totally, and you're in the open ocean. Mm-hmm. So it's fascinating that how far those fish will travel, which is really interesting. The good news, but it's also a challenge because fish have tails, so they're going to move. So it's hard to find. It's hard to find where they go. There's all this good work that's being done, and I don't know how much time you're going to want to spend with it, but before we go, I did want to just make the case. There's lots of ways that anglers can support the efforts of CCA, and many already are with your membership. We've got a large number of lifetime members that have contributed anywhere from $1,000 to $10,000. Several hundred of them. There's something else we just now have started, and that is a monthly contribution. You sign up for it. You can go online at CCA California. You sign up for it, and just a few dollars a month would go a long way. Each month in, it's automatically taken out of your credit card. If you want to stop it, you can. But you think about these numbers. If somebody just contributed, and people are just now beginning to do it, and it's a huge help. $10 a month, which is 33 cents a day. If just 2,000 anglers did that, we got 1 million anglers in California. If just 2,000 anglers did that, we'd raise $240,000. That would double the budget that CCA has. That would allow CCA to do twice as much work as it's doing. There's lots of ways to help. That's one of the most recent ways.
there's a lot of ways to get to spend your money and get more fish on your boat. And this may not be right in front of you sitting on your boat, but CCA is kind of like you said, it's the reason that there are some fish in the water and in turn fish on your boat. So, you spend all this money on electronics, on gear, but to spend the extra money and donate it to a cause like this to put fish in the water that you can catch is pretty incredible.
Yeah, and the other thing you can do is you can join one of your there's now, I think it's 7 chapters in Southern California. Join your local CCA chapter. You'll meet some interesting other anglers, some people that care about the resource and are working to help it. You'll be enriched by it, and you'll also have opportunities to do good things for the resource.
Yeah. So are there meetups? Are there events? Where do you meet other members?
Well, if by being connected to one of the local chapters. There's a chapter in San Diego. There's one in Orange County. There's one in the Inland Empire. There's one in L.A. There's one in the Channel Islands. There's one in Santa Barbara. There's new chapters being added all the time. So if you're interested in getting connected with a chapter, again, you could go to CCA website, ccacalifornia.com, and from there you can get a listing of chapters and when their next meeting or event is.
Yeah. All right. So what's your outlook on the future of being an angler on the West Coast of the United States? Is it an optimistic outlook? Is it, put on your gloves because we have more fighting to do, or what is your outlook?
Well, we got a lot more fighting to do. This is a tough state, and there's nothing that's a whole lot easier about Oregon or Washington, but there is also CCA chapters in Oregon and Washington. If I hadn't seen around the country where CCA had got involved in their states and seen the success that they'd have, I think I would take the attitude that many people in the state take, and that is that, boy, the anglers have no hope in this state because it's so dominated by the other side that doesn't really appreciate the value of experiencing Mother Nature firsthand, that doesn't really understand and appreciate the value of being an angler. And I probably might want to join a lot of other folks and throw my hands up and just quit. But, seeing what we've been able to accomplish just in the last 4 years, seeing what CCA has been able to accomplish in other states, what I really think is going to happen, what our goal is that CCA is ultimately going to have 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 chapters throughout the state. You have to have chapters in Northern California because we have one governor, we have one assembly, we have one Senate, we have one Fish and Game Commission, we have one Department of Fish and Wildlife. And if we're going to be able to influence them to the degree that we need to influence and to make the changes that we know need made, you got to be able to do it statewide. So, I think the future for fishing in California, my opinion, is going to be very different than what many others are, in large part because I've had the opportunity to see what CCA can do. And there's some pretty capable people that are committed to being able to do some of those same things here in California.
So put on your gloves and get ready for a fight ahead, but still pretty optimistic considering the people that are behind the CCA here. Yeah,
and I'm making a bet that it's going to continue to grow. And if you just look at the line, we started 4 or 5 years ago, and you chart to where we are today and what we've accomplished today versus 4 or 5 years ago. If we can just keep on that same path, then 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now, we're going to develop the ability to impact this state in a way that people don't believe that at this point, many people don't believe that we can.
Mm-hmm. So jumping back to the AB 3030, where did that leave off? Is it still going forward? Where did we leave off with AB 3030?
So what happened after we defeated it in the legislature? Governor Newsom created a executive order that created a process that was very similar to it. He gave new life to AB 3030, which wasn't all that bad because it wasn't like they were going to go away. We know that they've got a 10-year plan to affect what they want to affect, but it just put it into the arena of the governor's office as opposed to the legislature. So that battle is still ongoing. It will be, and regardless of what happens this year or next or 3 years from now, it will be ongoing for the next 10 plus years. Not just in California. It's now, there's been several other states that have introduced legislation. There is national legislation that is in the process of being introduced. And so this, it won't be called AB 3030 because that's Assembly Bill 3030. That was the name of it. It's just going to be they refer to it as 3030. It is going to be here for years. And if we're not strong enough to fight it, it isn't just fighting it, if we're not strong enough to bring some rational thought to that process, then just imagine when the MLPA process came into place here, it closed roughly 15% of the ocean, and it was different estimates, closer to 40% of the inshore fishing opportunities because they closed off the areas where there's habitat. Mm-hmm. So you close another 15%, and the impact of that for fishing is huge. The ultimate goal is to have a 50-50 plan. That is to close 50% of the water and land, the water both salt and fresh, and the land by the year 2050. So if you have grandkids and you want them to be able to fish in the future, and you want their kids to fish in the future, if we don't bring rational thought to this 30-30 and the ultimate 50-50 plan, take your fishing rods, throw them in a trash can, pick your boat, and turn it into a ski boat or a party boat, because you're not going to have fishing opportunity in California.
Yeah, it'll end up just being a 1 square mile radius where we can pack the entire fishing industry in and just have that be the one little fishing mile if the trend keeps up like this. This is ridiculous. So unrelated to all these crazy regulations and everything that we've been talking about, on a personal level, somebody said today that if you work in the fishing industry, you realize how little fishing you're able to do. Have you personally been able to go fishing lately?
God, I get more opportunities than it's been a month, but that's about to change because I've got my son Casey is now the president of AFTCO, and son Cody is the vice president. Daughter Christy is in management of the operations department. So I'm about to get a whole lot more opportunity, and something I fished all over the world and caught most every ocean fish I wanted to catch. I've never had a chance to do a lot of bass fishing. AFTCO has gotten very much involved in the bass fishing world in the last just started 3 years ago, and actually it's really become a very big part of our business very quickly.
Tell me more about that.
Well, AFTCO was always known as a saltwater company, and my son Casey thought we should be in the bass fishing business, so started a program 3 years ago, and we actually are beginning to dominate, many parts of that world. We now have, 20% of the anglers on the Elite Series are now AFTCO pros, and many of them, some of the top names that your listeners would know and recognize. And we've been able to take our conservation ethic and move it into the bass fishing world, and we're helping to create an awareness of conservation in bass fishing. And in our clothing business, so much of what we had learned in the saltwater fishing world, it applies to freshwater. I mean, if whether you're trying to protect yourself from the sun in the ocean or on a lake, it's still the same sun. Wet is wet from rain, and wet is wet even from spray, even if, whether it's freshwater or saltwater. So much of what we've been doing forever has just slid right into the bass fishing world, and that's been really exciting. It wasn't, we originally, you asked earlier, we started as a roller guide company making just a small amount of fishing tackle, and then we grew the saltwater tackle business, always focused on saltwater. Then in 1989, I started a clothing division here, and that grew along slowly, and then we were the licensee for Guy Harvey for, I guess about 15 years, and made all his product for a long period of time, and that helped us build a volume in the clothing business that we could hire key clothing people and folks who knew that business more specifically than what we had previously. And we then we're in a spot where we're going to just go focus just on our AFTCO brand. And since we've done that in the last 4 years, that clothing business has grown tremendously, and the bass fishing in that world's been a big part of it.
Yeah, it's such a logical progression into the freshwater scene. So I'm really happy to see you guys making the jump over to freshwater. I'm sure a lot of our listeners will as well. Can you talk about some of the pros that you guys endorse or are part of your guys' pro team?
Well, we've worked with Scott Martin since the beginning 3 years ago. Jason Christie, Drew Cook. They're not just all young guys. A guy named Drew Cook, who is the Elite Series Angler of the Year 2 years ago, is coming on strong. And Gerald Swindell, most recently. Gerald's been probably one of the best known pros that we have. Most recently, Ike Iconelli. So there's, I think, 20 different pros just from the Elite Series. And it's a good bunch of guys.
Yeah, so you're jumping into the freshwater scene with both feet, getting some really good members of your team there and making a big impact in the freshwater scene.
Yeah, we are. It's been very exciting to see for AFTCO.
All right. Well, any parting words, Bill, for our listeners today?
Yeah, if you're a fisherman in Southern California, if you're a saltwater fisherman in Southern California, figure out a way to give back to the community. I want to encourage you to figure out a way to give back to the resource. The challenge is you go fishing to get away from your problems, so you don't want to pick up another problem and another involvement. But CCA California, it deserves your support. It's earned your support from what it's done in the last 4 or 5 years. And so I'd really encourage you to, listen to your friend next time he talks to you about CCA. When Western Outdoor News and other publications write something about CCA, pay attention to it. When you go online and go to CCA California and learn about what we're doing. And there's going to be some talent that you have, some ability that you have, some relationship that you have that could be helpful to CCA and therefore helpful to fishing. So I encourage you to take advantage of using those gifts that you have and those abilities that you have to help out.
A big thank you to Bill Shedd for having that conversation with us. We actually have a lot more conversations like that lined up, so be sure to hit subscribe in your favorite podcast app or on YouTube to see all the latest episodes of the Western Outdoor News podcast. We'll see you next week.